Howdy, Shasta College. How you doing? It is our second week in our Humanities 4 film studies. Hope you had an interesting weekend. Hope you have the textbook now. If not, you won't do as well. But if you do have the textbook, you want to concentrate on page 40 on to the end of the chapter. It's going to help you write the essay that's going to be your first assignment. It tells you essentially what to look for, how to analyze a film, the themes, lighting, camera, direction, all that. That chapter is going to cover all that. I'm also going to do the best I can to cover it, but I also want to make sure you guys are keeping up in your journal, what we do every week. Write it down. It won't be due till the end of the semester, but you'll have to submit something for each week that we have the course. This week, we're going to be doing more silent films, early cinema, and then we'll move on to the next decade. Each of these weeks live in this virtual world. I will be covering another decade in film history up until this decade. But we're just getting started. And your first assignment is going to be assigned. I'll probably do that tomorrow. But you're going to have to watch the movie Metropolis by Fritz Lang, 1927. I will post it. It's free. You don't have to pay for it, but you do have to sit through it. And if you don't sit through it, you won't do well on the paper. Sitting through anything, I don't care what it is a discipline. I know we're all used to the TikTok world of 30-second little funny bits. This is not that. This is world class cinema when people had the patience to sit still for 80 minutes. And you're probably going to have to do the same thing, or you won't make a very good essay. And on the essays, I will explain this all later on in more detail. Please, you're going to probably not have to just watch the film. You might have to do some research to understand the film more deeply. But do not depend on copying and pasting an article or something at a Wikipedia or some other source. Uh, I'll spot that. You don't want to do that. Just write an honest paper. That's all I ask. In your own words, your own thoughts and analysis. That's all I'm looking for. One more thing about the paper, it's not a review of the film. It's not whether you like it or don't like it or why it's good or you think it's cool. We got to explain why you think it's cool or not cool. Explanation is everything. Break it down. Look at those pages in the book. It's going to help. I'll cover a little bit of that more as we go along. Today, um, silent films is became so popular at the time when they first started coming out. They were viewed in these small little boxes called Nickelodeons. You put a nickel in, you can look into the box, and you watch a 2-minute movie of a horse running, or man and woman embracing, or a juggler juggling, or a dancer dancing. That was about as far as they went until the French started making films that were more demanding. They told a story. They're filmed very much like a stage play, meaning proscenium. That means the stage is up there, the audience is back there, because they didn't have the ways and means of doing moving cameras or close-ups. We still don't have sound. We have music and sound effects, but no spoken dialogue. That doesn't happen until the late 1920s with the jazz singer. Um, so in about 1915, D.W. Griffith made a revolutionary film called Birth of a Nation about the Civil War, the end of the Civil War. And it was very controversial. And it was the most popular film of its day. It made a bunch of money. People paid their nickel by the thousands. Uh, Woodrow Wilson was in the White House and he was our president. He loved this film so much he showed it several times in the White House. And essentially, it's a story about a community where the slaves are freed and they start running amok. And they start supposedly threatening the city with violence, threatening the women with sexual violence, and they feel outnumbered. The town does, the white people in the town, and at the very end of the movie, the cavalry doesn't come to save the day, the police don't save the day, but the Ku Klux Klan saves the day. And they come in and they wipe out all the bad black slaves, save the white people from their stress and their victimhood. And the film was so popular that it was a big hit, except for in big cities like that had large black populations, like Chicago and Pittsburgh and Detroit, and the press there started writing critically of this film, not just saying, "Hey, it's great, it's rousing." Yeah, it's all that. He created camera angles no one had done before. He did a moving camera, no one had done it before. He did close-ups, no one had done it before. He revolutionized a lot of cinema language. But in the meantime, he made simply a racist film. And it was pointed out by African American writers who were writing about it. Excuse me, I'm going to sneeze. Pardon me. African American writers who wrote about it in their papers, and people started reading about it like the whole time. The Ku Klux Klan saves the day. The blacks were mostly portrayed by white actors in blackface, and they're just all the cliche of the lazy black um, slave Negro. The men are all lazy and barefoot and eating fried chicken and watermelon, and their sexual appetite for white women is, um, what can I say, very exaggerated. And the women are all sluts and harlots, and there's not a good depiction of a black person in the movie, and then the white Ku Klux Klan come in and saves the day. Well, this movie was so popular in its day that there was a parade in Washington D.C. and of the Ku Klux Klan. The city was shut down, and hundreds of thousands of people were lining the streets. And it was so popular with the population that the Ku Klux Klan grew in size to over 150,000 new enlistees after this movie played. Well, it wasn't until the critics started looking at the film critically and noticing that that's not a good thing to show, depict, and that the backlash started on this film, even in D.W. Griffith's lifetime. And so it has a permanent asterisk on its credits and all the great things it did for cinema language, but not telling the story. Now, D.W. Griffith used to defend himself. That's fine. Um, he said, "This is how I was born and raised." He was born and raised in the South. This is what he saw, what he heard as a child, and he was only depicting that. He later did another movie to kind of make up for this movie called Intolerance. If you guys ever get a chance, I suggest you attempt to watch both of them because they're incredible works of cinema. They're on YouTube, I think, for free. Intolerance, he attempts to tell the entire story of mankind. He starts with Adam and Eve. It's all black and white, silent. He tells the story of Adam and Eve, the birth of Christ, the crucifixion of Christ, the Holy Roman Empire, and their demise. He goes up until what was then modern times. Um, it does go into modern times. Uh, Whenever he made the movie, 1917 or so thereabouts, and he tried to kind of make up for his depiction of African Americans in his first film. It helped a lot, but he had always kind of had to live with this racist tag that is very prevalent to this day. You know, you have to judge the film for what it is. Is it a racist film? Absolutely. Does it have brilliance and innovation and revolutionary cinematic ideas? Absolutely, and that's why it's important, and that's why it matters. I Here's a brief personal note. I used to work in movies in LA on crew as a crew member, and I was working on some lame TV movie, and we're filming in the Hollywood Cemetery on Santa Monica Boulevard. Maybe you know what it is. It's the old cemetery in Hollywood. There's a ton of old s- movie stars buried in there. And I'm just wandering around one day and I run into this big, elaborate grave with fountains and its own pond. And it was the grave of D.W. Griffith. I didn't even know it was in there. This is long before internet. You couldn't look everything up on your iPhone. Yeah, look for it the old fashioned way. And I thought, wow, DW, he's got the big grave in there, and along with a lot of other early cinema heroes. Here's another side note. When I was wandering around, I walked into a crypt. You know what that is? Where they buried people in the wall. They didn't bury them in the ground, and it was half a dozen people who had been killed on the Titanic. It's a heavy graveyard, and a lot of history in that graveyard. I don't know if you've ever seen, you know what the Titanic is in the movie, at least. Well, that really happened, and those people got buried somewhere, and a lot of men, the Hollywood Park Cemetery. Anyway, there's a little trivia about Hollywood, how we treat our legendary heroes and villains. So, um, there was a trio of comedians led by Charlie Chaplin, Buster Keaton, Harold Lloyd. They were the most popular comedians of their day. I don't know who do you compare them to now. Adam Sandler, Will Ferrell, and who? I'd have to think of that one. Um, Ricky Gervais, who's my favorite. Um, uh, they did these comedies, famous comedies, and that really packed the theaters. Charlie Chaplin was hugely famous in his day and wealthy because of this. He created a character called the Little Tramp. Maybe you've seen. I'm going to show you some samples of this, and you'll look for it in modules. Um, and he created this character that was so endearing to people that they couldn't get enough of it. And Buster Keaton created his own character. They all had their own characters. Harold Lloyd, his character is not as easily defined as those two. He's kind of a nerdy, collegiate guy, kind of like Woody Allen, if you know who Woody Allen is. More of a cerebral thing. They all have their signature outfits and their signature comic, and they're all trying to do the same thing. All the movies are about existing in the modern world, their modern world. This would be the 1900s to about 1932, thereabouts. They did all their best work in silent films. Yes, they did some sound films later, but not as successful. Charlie Chaplin, he did some great sound films. The Little Dictator he did before the war, before World War II, and it's an anti-Nazi movie. It's a brave film, but he worked on films up until the 1950s with sound, folks, but not the other two. The other two kind of fell by the wayside, and they're victims of their time. They had a good time when they did. Um, Buster Keaton fell into alcoholism and died in the 60s. Last thing he was doing was these exploitation films. They're called beach party movies, and he was in several of them playing his old character. I don't believe he even had any dialogue. Harold Lloyd essentially didn't make any more movies, but he did these incredible stunt work. I'll show you an example of that. Look for the modules. I'm going to show you 3 scenes from each of their famous films in modules tonight. Look for it. Um, he did all his own stunts, and they were really dangerous. So they all did, In those days, there was no stuntmen, there was no trick photography, there was no CGI. They did it for real, and a lot of them were horribly injured. This one stunt where Buster Keaton literally jumps from one building to another. He missed the jump and broke his back. So Tom Cruise, yeah, he says he does his own stunt. Yeah, sure, whatever. Um, these guys actually did anything and everything to get a laugh out of people, and even at their own um, physical detriment. And they all got injured. Harold Lloyd, in his heyday, blew with an accident with dynamite in his hand. He blew a bunch of his fingers off, and he wore a prosthetic hand with regular real they weren't real folks, and he kept right on with his films. That's just what they did. They took the gamble that people wanted to see, just like we do now, just like you guys want to see. Or I assume I don't care about. They want to see more special effects, more uh, guys falling through windows, jumping over buildings. That was popular then. These guys started the language, the cinema language. That's how important they are. I'll show you those examples because I know you don't have time to look at all these films. I wish you did, because then you'd really get a rich look at what silent films really are, not just this kind of jerky, boring black and white films that you might think they are, or maybe you've seen a few scenes here and there. But it is a rich language that was as profound and revolutionary for its time as it is now. We're still riding the shoulders of these great filmmakers from 100 years ago. So anyway, those three comedians, look for those film clips. Look at page 40. Look at what how to write some of um, your essay. And I know this seems simple, but it isn't. Fundamentals of film form. It's on page 40. Movies depend on light. Movies provide an illusion of movement. They are called movies, folks. There's movement. They're called movies because there's movement. And a lot of it is the illusion of movement, meaning speeding cars when they're not really speeding cars, doing dangerous stunts when they're actually all done in a studio and it's safe. It's the illusion of movement. And movies manipulate space and time in unique ways. They compress time and they expand time. They don't film anything in real time. It would be boring. You wouldn't want to look at it. So everything's either sped up or they slow it down, like in slow motion. Like, let's say for The Matrix, if you've seen it with Keanu, half those stunts are done in slow motion. They're expanding time. That's not reality, folks. That's not how we all move. Or in other movies where they're speeding through the streets of San Francisco on a motorcycle, they crank the camera to where it speeds up everything. They're not really going that fast, folks. Even Tom Cruise is not going as fast as you think he is. But and then it breaks each thing down. Why does it depend on light? What's the deal with light? Well, early film stock was so slow. What they call the SI was so slow. It would be 5 or 10. Your cell phone camera right now is like 3,000, meaning it could film almost anything in any light. Turn off all the lights in your house, your cell phone camera will still pick up images. They couldn't do that in those days. The film was not fast enough. This is the early film was really slow. And so they had to flood the image with light. And so when you see an image on the screen in a silent film, you have to remember there's thousands of watts of light aimed at the action and the actors or the scenery or whatever. It's got a lot of light on it, artificial light to make it look real. And the people who were controlling that were the directors of photography. They used to be called cinematographers. They were the guys responsible for the camera and everything up to do with the camera. That's not the director's job. The cinematographer's job is to light the scene, to film it with a camera. And in those days, they used to operate their own cameras. They don't do that anymore. Um, it's everything. The director and cinematographer work closely together to get a cohesive vision of a film. And so a director tells the cinematographer what he wants, what kind of look he wants for a scene. I want it dark. I want it moody. I want it rainy. I want it cloudy. I want it mysterious, or I want it bright. I want it cheery. And then the cinematographer, director of photography, has to arrange all that. So they have to be experts in lighting. And then they have a whole crew of people that they tell where to put the lights. They get out there with their light meters. They make sure it's all exposed correct. Lots of mistakes have happened. I made a couple movies myself, and our director of photography made some mistakes. He underexposed, overexposed things, and essentially it could ruin a whole scene because you can't save it in the lab. That's with film. Video is different. We'll talk about that later. Video is a lot different, a lot more forgiving. In video, you get what you see on your device, whether either camera, whatever you see in the whatever image you see in the viewfinder, that's what you're going to get on the screen. In the old days of Hollywood cinema, that did not happen. What you saw in the viewfinder was just an indicator of what was on the scene. It wasn't until they developed that film and they got the print back to watch it in the movie theater to see if it was exposed correctly. And a lot of it wasn't. They have to redo it. And it costs a lot of money. That's why you need a real expert cinematographer. Uh, and then it shows you different lighting. Like on this page 41, there's some stuff from Grapes of Wrath. Henry Fonda, Grapes of Wrath. Just look at the lighting. It's dark, moody. His face is in shadow, except for where it needs to be in light. What does that scene tell you? You can see so much in that scene without dialogue. It's mysterious, right? It's possibly at night. He's somewhere where he's not supposed to be. He's seeing something maybe he shouldn't see. If you've seen the movie with Henry Fonda, directed by the great John Ford, you'll know what the scene is. There's apprehension in his face. So the actor is creating his performance. The lighting is creating its performance, and they go together, both of them. Now, nowadays, well, we do this now. This is modern. That's 1940 about. Um, Now we have them talking a lot, especially on TV, and everything is kind of filmed in a flat, bright way. And television is all about talking. But real movies show you tricky lighting, mood lighting to enhance the emotion of the scene, whether it's funny or dramatic or scary, horrifying. It should depict that. And that's the beauty of movies. They're a visual medium, unlike any other that we've ever had in our history. And when the visual and the story are working together, you have a work of art. So look at what is a frame, single frame of movie. Now, it's all on video cameras now, but they have a frame rate and how to manipulate these frames. And then there's all sorts of realism, non-realism, a formula looking, even has a couple pages on the Matrix. You know, the Matrix with Keanu Reeves. Now it has a movie I'm going to post that I want you guys to watch. It's called Trip to the Moon. And when I say trip, man, it is a trip. It's only 12 minutes long. It's probably your first real exposure of a real silent film made by a French filmmaker, Millet, who really started narrative cinema in France. He worked on other things after this. It's a surreal trip, man, about people on Earth going to the moon. First sci-fi movie ever made. And this is what they thought science was. I'm going to post it. You guys watch it. And maybe in your conversations, we'll be talking about it. That's what the discussion is going to be about this week. Trip to the moon. What did you see? What did you feel? What do you think is going on there? What do you think is happening? It's only 12 minutes. I dare you to sit through the whole thing. Because this week you're going to have to sit through Metropolis and write your first paper. And you're going to be excited and you're going to be jazzed because it's all new to you. And education is about new. It's about bold moves. And these are bold films. They're bold, bolder than X-Men, Ant-Man, Wonder Woman, Barbie. There would be none of that without these films paving the way. Welcome to week 2, film studies, and look for the postings and modules, and the story of film continues.